we live? Test, test. Cool, I think we are live. So I'm just going to chill out and wait for more people to show up. How long ago did I say I would be starting? About 5 minutes ago. 5:40. Alright, so we'll wait like a couple of more minutes and then get started. And here's what my Twitter looks like. This is just my desktop. And yeah, I'm happy with this being pretty interactive. So if you all have questions, I've got the chat log open on my second screen here. So any questions you have about stuff, please go ahead and ask, and I'll, answer in line as we go. I don't know if I should tidy up or what. Oh, how does my desktop look? Oh, are there too many icons on it? Whatever. Are people judging me? This is my desktop wallpaper. It's pretty cool. This desktop wallpaper, by the way, is... I guess there's sort of there's almost a long story to it. It's so people who have played Doom might recognize this little section right here, vaguely, sort of, as the Doom Episode 1 skybox from Knee Deep in the Dead. So what that actually is let me switch over here. It's is this it? Yeah. So this is an old stock photo that was on a CD-ROM of stock photos in the late 80s, early 90s, back when that was a big deal, to have photographs and stuff. Yeah, and so this. And I think one of these wallpapers, this wallpaper image came bundled with IBM's OS/2 operating system. And so when the art team was working on Doom, they looked at one of these wallpapers, and I think I forget who it was, either Kevin Cloud or Adrian Carmack, probably just cropped this little section of Skybox and then worked with it in Deluxe Paint, and then ended up with the now, I don't know how famous and recognizable the Doom Episode 1 Skybox is, but it's seared into my memory, and a lot of people would probably kind of recognize it, like, oh yeah. Anyway, so what I did was I took the source image, like the original wallpaper image that the Doom art was taken from, and then I ran it through my ASCII paint program, EDSCII, or at least the first generation of it, and it has a raster image. Just take any kind of general bitmap image and then convert it into ASCII characters, or whatever character set you specified, which in this case is PETSCII, the Commodore 64 character set, which kind of has some of its own unique quirks compared to like DOS ASCII, for instance. And so yeah, I ran it through that conversion process, and that turned it into this beautiful just jumble of different, just different characters and stuff. And I really love the way that it looks. And then as the final step, I ran it through a CRT filter that a guy named Matthias Gustafsson, I think his name is, developed for a retro, like a retro computing platform type project that he did. And it's basically the best CRT shader that I've really seen. It doesn't just create crappy alternating black and white lines. It actually kind of simulates the blur and bleed that you get from phosphors and stuff like that. Anyway, I ran that as a post process on this thing and that's what generated this finished wallpaper image. All right, and with that, I think we're about ready to go here. So yeah, let me bring these windows up. So yeah, let me just launch this thing here. Just because, I don't know, I'll just explain as I go rather than just talking over an empty desktop or something. This is, you might have seen me posting little screenshots of this or vines of it or something. But this is something that I've been working on, and it's still kind of in early stages. It's also not that big of a project, so I'm hoping to have it finished, depending on how much time I have to work on it in the next few weeks. I'm hoping to have it like just completely finished and just in people's hands, by which I mean on their hard drives, in the next, before too long. But yeah, so I don't know if anybody recognizes this, but this is Ultima 4's world map. It's the entire world map that you could explore in the old Ultima 4 game. Yeah, and it's got, you can zoom in and out smoothly and pan around. And the texture, the little water texture is panning here. And so yeah, some explanation, I guess, for this is in order. I'll get into why I decided to build this in a bit. But so yeah, actually, like 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, actually, in 2009, just kind of on a whim, I forget what. I actually built an older version of this application. Yeah, which works very similarly, really. But the scrolling, it doesn't scroll smoothly. Like, you can kind of pan along in either direction here. But this is actually using just 2D drawing, because this old version I made in Pygame, which, is just kind of a Python wrapper on SDL, that adds some things that make it significantly easier to get a game up and running. So I made this thing back in the day, and it was partly for I did a post on my blog. Actually, you just get to see me navigate to it with my web browser and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So and I wrote this thing. The accompanying blog post is called Imaginative Play, and you can see it on my website, vectorpoem.com. And I just started it off with this image. This post is actually about how low image fidelity, low audiovisual fidelity in old games ends up doing an interesting thing in players' minds cognitively. Because and this was sort of like a spectrum of representationalism here, where you've got like a quote-unquote realistic character, which is actually, absolutely an art-directed thing with its own style, and then you've got something that's more obviously painted, and then you've got something that's, and I mean, these are arbitrary points on this spectrum, and it's not just a simple 1D spectrum, of course. Anyway, so, I mean, I don't know, if you like reading, things about game design and, whatever. But yeah, like the thing that I made this program specifically because I felt like Ultima 4's world was such a good example of this idea of and I'll go back to the app here. Was such a good example of like just the right amount of fidelity that something kind of interesting happens in your brain. All the pixel art for this game, and I'll turn off the CRT filter to make it a little more clear. All the art for this game is kind of done against a black background. Like obviously this is meant to be grass, and then there's like a forest, and there's hills, and a mountain range here, and water. But it's all against a black background, and there's something that this is entirely just I don't think it's like some universal principle or anything, but it's something that's captivated me. I think like a lot of the formative games for me when I was a kid on the Commodore 64 also like they were kind of like sprites drawn against a black background, and so like the default color of something wasn't instead of making this entire thing green, it's actually black with a few little speckles of it, and that's kind of something about that is interesting to me, because I think the black screen specifically, it creates this negative space in a literal as well as more metaphorical sense that your brain fills in, And so when I looked at, I think I discovered the Ultima 4 thing. Like, you can get a static version of this map that is just a big PNG image on VG Maps, I think. VG, the video game Atlas. I love this site. It's just got a whole bunch of old screenshot maps, like Mega Man 2 for the Game Boy. You can just, there's like these big... People have pieced together either by decompiling the ROM or just piecing together screenshots and stuff. And there's just a bajillion of these, and they're all totally sweet. Like this is a map of like the Game Boy Color version of 720. And like these screenshot maps, they give you like this zoomed out view of a game world that you never really had playing it, where it would have been focused on like, a normal arcade screen resolution sized thing, so you'd only be seeing a tiny window of this. Whereas when you can see these whole things like all the way zoomed out, there's a real beauty to it, that you can't, because you get to see like the entire architectural and game design sort of thing here. So anyway, I think I saw the Ultima 4 world map on that Video Game Atlas site, and then was like, hey, what if I made like a real-time version of that? That would be kind of cool. And it was also just like 5 years ago when I was doing the first version of this. I just kind of wanted to stretch my programming abilities a little bit. What I ended up doing was this is actually reading from. Yeah. Sweet, yeah, cool. This is actually reading from the original Ultima 4 game data files. So shapes.ega is where it's reading all of the tile data from. So these are like, it's just going through the binary bits of this file. And I really enjoy that you can see the date stamps on these things where the date stamps of the original Ultima 4 data is like April 3rd, 1986, August 24th, 1987, and then like my code, which is like written like, almost 20 years later at this point. And yeah, so it's reading in the original stuff, and that's just like picking through binary data, and that part of it was actually a little bit of a pain to. Let me jump over to. This was an early version of this where I was just decompiling the sprite data and putting it onto an OpenGL texture. And that's all that's all the environment sprites in like the world tile data sprites in Ultima 4. There's a whole bunch of monsters here and town graphics and maybe some dungeon graphics as well that you don't actually see on the world map here. And then this is an early version of when I was decoding the world data from world.map. I got the algorithm wrong and it was in chunks or something. Yeah, so, it's reading in that stuff. And so I did that 5 years ago and was reasonably happy with it. It performed kind of slow, and there was like a kind of a visual glitch with the scrolling and stuff. But I just kind of set it aside because I was like, yeah, I've kind of taken this as far as I really want to. And then I returned to it more recently, and part of the reason I'm doing this stream is because of why I decided that this was worth going back to. So another project of mine is something that I made about 2.5 years ago now, I guess. Is a project called Edski. Now, this looks like a Commodore 64 basic prompt, if you're down, but actually it is a paint program. And I've got a page on this on my site, and I've posted a video about it on YouTube. But yeah, this is actually a paint program that uses ASCII characters, and it's using the Commodore 64 PETSCII character set and color palette right now, just because that's what it defaults to, because that's the way I wanted it, and that's the beauty of PETSCII art is kind of what inspired me to make this in the first place. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because like you can pick just sort of like, it's ASCII, and so unlike pixel art, it has every character, every single tile, every single little square on the grid here has three things. It has a character, so I can put down a bunch of H's or something, and then it has a foreground color and a background color. And I really enjoyed making this, and more recently, I guess, I've been doing, let's see here, you just get to watch me just navigate my desktop and all that kind of jazz. And you get to see the contents of my Dropbox, I guess. Edski, there we go. So yeah, this is like some artwork. This is artwork that I've done more recently. I would just do like doodles and stuff. And these are things that I made with Edski, with the old version of Edski. Learning experience. And these are just like random things that I did. Yeah, that's the Doom engine that I converted, which I did not actually paint this. I used the raster to ASCII conversion thing. Same with this image of Tom Baker. This one I painted. Yeah, this was the very first one that I did. And, I was kind of like remembering like, oh yeah, Edski was rad and I should really go back to that at some point. So basically I decided that I want to make a new generation version of Edski. And I want to make it a really cool little game art tool that people could use. That people besides myself, that has like, even if it has kind of a quirky interface, I want people to be able to use it. I want it to be a friendly interface. Like, I think I like the interface that I made for this first version of Petski here, and I think it does some really some interesting stuff. But I kind of wanted to revisit that, and I also just wanted to, I want to do things like have multiple layers a la Photoshop, so that you can paint things on different layers, because that makes it a lot easier to manage stuff and make the kind of artwork result that you want. And I wanted to support animation, so that you could make little game sprites or animated GIFs or whatever, because I think all of that stuff is really cool. And as I started thinking about it, I realized that actually this is, I wrote this, Edski is written in Pygame, and it's actually, it wouldn't really be that far from... It's only a short distance from once I have like animation and transparent layers support and all that kind of stuff. It's actually kind of within striking distance of being a simple 2D game engine with a really weird ASCII art based world representation paradigm, and that's kind of interesting to me. And I think that there are games that I would like to make with that. And I think that is sort of a space where I'm not like a really good artist or anything. But I really enjoyed doing those little Edski doodles, and I think there's kind of like a way for me to find a voice as, making some small-scale games, which is something that I've been doing for a long time now. So anyway, the new version of Edski that I want to make is called Playski, and it's going to be, it's going to be an ASCII art tool, and then an ASCII art and animation tool, and then eventually, hopefully, an ASCII like game engine of sorts. Game engine is kind of a lofty, overloaded concept, but it's just something that I feel like I can make pretty simple games with, and I want to share that. It'll be open source, absolutely, because pretty much everything I do is. And I want other people to use it, like I want to, like, if other artists show up and they want to make stuff with Playski, that is an extremely rad thing for me, and I want to like make it pleasant for them to use. And if people want to share and modify it, I think that's really cool too. So anyway, getting back to this Ultima 4 thing that I'm doing here, I realized that in order to hit some of the user interface goals and just application robustness things for this new version of Edski called Playski, I was like, yeah, I kind of want to learn OpenGL so that this can actually, like, Pygame is sort of showing us its age, and it's got some limitations, and whereas I kind of want to up my programming game a little here, and also do this in a way that like it's going to be a cool application. Because one of the things that I realized since I wrote Edski is that CRT shaders are like beautiful. Like when they're done well, like Matthias Gustafsson's thing here, CRT shaders really transform. Like I can turn this thing off, and this just kind of looks like pixel art, like it's primitive tile-based pixel art. Whereas when you put the CRT shader on, it kind of aesthetically completes it in a way that like kind of makes me feel like there's something really interesting there, and like yeah, so. And so, in order to run a shader over the screen, I was like, yeah, I probably need to use OpenGL for this. So, for a while, a lot of the time that I spent getting this up and running was just getting OpenGL, like just learning OpenGL, because I had never done anything with OpenGL before, and and that was kind of a learning curve because I haven't really worked with a graphics API directly before. And yeah, a couple of people helped me. Sean Taylor, aka Binary Crusader on Twitter, and Sean Barrett, the veteran programmer and author of the STB libraries and worked on Thief and all that. So those two guys helped me out with learning stuff. Sean gave me a really good Sean Barrett gave me a really good kind of brain dump on, that helped me understand a lot of this OpenGL stuff. And so now I've got something that is like reasonably, it's running reasonably. So this is definitely still a work in progress. There's a whole bunch of things that I'm not happy with about it, like the textures resample in kind of a gross way. I'm using nearest neighbor filtering so that it's all chunky and blocky here. Actually, I should back up a little bit. Anyway, to finish with my explanation of why this exists and why I'm doing this OpenGL rewrite of it, is that actually when I thought about it, this was like a perfect stepping stone to getting Playski up and running, because it's reading from a tile map, it's using pixel art, but then it's running a shader over it, and the camera moves around smoothly and it zooms smoothly. And this is kind of like a prototype for the look and feel of what I want Playski to feel like. I want you to be able to fly around, like if you want to make a really huge ASCII art composition or something, like maybe a level for a game. I want you to be able to fly around that smoothly and bring up tool panels and paint and have it really feel like a good painting program and all that kind of stuff. And so I realized, oh yeah, there's that thing that I did 5 years ago. It's just this simple little fly around Ultima 4's old game world and stuff, and I can use it as a test bed and kind of get through some of the learning pains of OpenGL and writing an application that uses, the software stack that I want to use, practice shipping this application and getting compat testing, make sure that it works on people's video cards and whatever. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, now a little bit about this application itself. Right now, I've got all of this is up on my Bitbucket, by the way. That's where I host all of my code. Bitbucket.org, JP Lebreton, and yeah, you can see that I've been doing commits to the Ultima 4 map viewer. This README is out of date, actually, so anything that it says about Python dependencies and stuff is going to be out of date. That's for the old version that I made 5 years ago. But you can see the code commits and stuff, and you can see some of how I'm building this thing. I am using... this is my to-do list, which is also just up on the Bitbucket. This is kind of what I've got left to do. Sort of in priority order. So I am writing this in Python, and maybe somebody will tell me that that's a bad idea or something, because Python is not, it's a scripting language and it's not as performant as Lewis, say, or something. But if I'm using, and I did run into performance problems with Pygame back in the day when I would do moderately ambitious stuff in Pygame. Pygame, you have this sort of abstracted interface where you're blitting things to the screen. Let me go back to the old version of the old version of this. This runs fine on this machine, but on older machines, it ran kind of chuggy, and you can't zoom in, obviously. I made this kind of mini map thing that would just show you where you were in the world. But yeah, and and scrolling you kind of had to do manually by swapping things out and all that, the way, in kind of a weird recreation. I was also a much less experienced programmer in 2009. So now what I'm using is Python 3. And maybe people in the chat can tell me that that's a bad idea. But I'm using Python 3 because at this point, Python 3 seems like it basically supports all of the libraries that are relevant to game development, or that I would want to use, compared to Python 2, which is older, but has this huge amount of legacy modules and software, code written for it. So yeah, I'm using Python 3 because it seems like a better way to do things if you're writing a modern application. I'm using PySDL2, which are the Python bindings for SDL2, the Simple Direct Media Library 2. SDL2 is a huge improvement over SDL, and it makes it a lot easier, honestly. Basically, I've run this code in Windows, and it runs just fine. Assuming that you don't run into GPU compatibility issues, which is, that's OpenGL stuff that I'll get to that. It runs, the same code runs just fine in Linux and Windows, and I'm hoping Mac. I don't have a Mac to test on, but I definitely intend to support that. And a lot of that cross-platform niceness comes from SDL2 because they've sort of solved input handling and creating a window with an OpenGL context in it that I can draw to. And then I'm using just PyOpenGL, which is the Python bindings for OpenGL, which uses C types, so it's actually not dependent on C code, which I'm still learning about kind of what the pros and cons of this are, but it's basically not dependent on a specific implementation of Python. Like when you just download Python from python.org, you're getting CPython, which is the interpreter that's written in C, and so it's going to be platform dependent. It's going to have some architecture dependence and things like that. Whereas, there's other interpreters for Python out there, and some of them have really good performance. Like PyPy goes really fast, apparently. And it's not that I care a ton about supporting alternate interpreters right now. It's possible that down the road, if people start writing serious games in this and they need that extra performance, then PyPy is a good option to have. So I think, I shopped around for technology a lot on this, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm still most comfortable using either Python or Lua. Lua goes plenty fast, but I don't know, there's some, I just really appreciate some of the stuff that Python has that Lua doesn't. So anyway, that's kind of my technology stack. Some of it might be a bad idea, but really, at the end of the day, a lot of what I'm doing here is, this is just kind of a goofy thing. A lot of what I'm doing here, the PySDL stuff is pretty straightforward. At the very beginning here, it's okay, SDL2 initialize, create a window, and then specify a specific GL version. I still got to kind of figure out where I want to go there. Get a draw context, and then and actually do a little bit of SDL draw calls, because I want to be able to do that if I need to. Because getting text on the screen, for instance, with GL, just for a quick debug or prototype thing, I want to. Anyway, and then a lot of what I'm doing here though is just raw. Part of the benefit of because PyOpenGL is such a kind of one-to-one in most cases. Binding for the OpenGL API, a lot of this will be pretty familiar to OpenGL programmers. Let me go into my into my the main renderable world object thing. That's kind of and yeah, a lot of this is just OpenGL stuff. Get uniform location, and then I create the geometry as a NumPy array, and then I turn that into a vertex buffer and all that, and that's another thing, is that I'm using sort of the modern OpenGL way. There's the old fixed function OpenGL way where everything is very imperative, and you do GL begin and then just say here's a vertex, now here's a color and all that. I really liked. I learned that 15 years ago or something, and it was really cool to work with. But it's just, it's kind of going the way of the dinosaur, which is a shame, because it was easy to work with, and it kind of felt like Logo, if you've ever used that, where you're just doing this cool, just straight ahead imperative drawing on the screen, and it's really immediate and fun. And this modern way, that was a large part of my learning curve here. That those two fellows helped through, was just figuring out how to create all of this stuff in OpenGL properly. Where you generate a buffer, you get all your vertices in a list and in an array, and then you just feed that to OpenGL, and you create a vertex array object and a vertex buffer object and all that, and then you bind it, and then you set shader uniforms and attributes, that tell it how to interpret the OpenGL data, and then you render it, getting my head around that was difficult and frustrating at times, but doable, and I feel like I'm kind of over the hump on that stuff now. Actually, I'm kind of retooling. There's a big bug in how the world is rendering here, and so I'm kind of what's just happened here? Did my program stop responding or something? Oh, here it is. Just didn't respond to Alt-Tab. I don't know. Ubuntu's been weird lately. So yeah, getting all of that stuff going. And so I've still got a ways to go. There's these visual glitches and stuff that I don't like. Like if you zoom way in, you can see it a little more clear. I don't know if this actually shows up on the stream, but I'm doing the water panning in the shader for the world, and this is weird. Okay, that's just the that's the vertex shader for the world, which just handles the camera projection matrix and stuff. And there's probably a lot that I could improve here. I'm still learning. I'm still definitely learning GLSL. You know, there's clearly like just a ton of power in it. If there's a GLSL mode for Emacs, by the way, I would love to see that, because good syntax highlighting for GLSL shaders. Like I'm going to be working with shaders a lot here. Anyway, this is the weird like conditional statement shader that I'm using to pan the water, just because like every other way that I was thinking about how to pan the water like just kind of sucked. Like either I was submitting a ton of updated UV data for every single tile in the world per frame, and that just seemed like garbage. And mutating the texture data and then resending it to the card seemed like, you know, that seemed really, really silly. So yeah, so I ended up with this weird shader that runs just fine on the two systems that I've tried it on so far. But there is a weird artifact with it. And so yeah, I got to figure that out. There's like these there's these lines, there's these blue lines here that I think are cropping up because of how I'm sampling the texture in order to pan it. So that's weird, you know, and I'll figure that out. It's all good, you know, and it's all almost all of this stuff, aside from just monkeying around with the Ultima 4 specific data. All of this is helping me create the new version. It's going to make it much easier for me to get once I'm done with this, to jump in and create the new version to create Playsky. And so that's exciting. That's the other thing, is that I definitely wanted to be able to run a cool CRT shader, because I think that's just like indispensable to the aesthetic of it. Let me open up the CRT shader here. So yeah, most of this, and I give credit up top. He posted, Matthias Gustafsson posted a GLSL version of his CRT shader up on ShaderToy, and so you can just play with that in the web browser, because ShaderToy is amazing. And then I took that and kind of like read through it and kind of tried to understand what it was doing, and then pruned away some of the features that it was doing that I didn't need or want, like screen warp. I mean, you know, down the road, like maybe I'll make Playsky support screen warp, because some people consider that indispensable to looking at an old monitor, whereas I just kind of wanted like the blur and bleed and like that weird, you know, just the weird bloom. And there's probably some visual artifacts from some of my modifications to it, but yeah, it does this weird like just sample a whole bunch of points around the pixel and then kind of like blur it out and stuff. Yeah, and so it's doing all kinds of just like weird hand-tuned math here to produce this effect that I think is really nice, and I want to keep digging on it and playing with it and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that kind of covers what I've got so far. Yeah, like as you can see on my to-do, there's a bug with the world geometry. I don't know how much time I'm going to have to work on this project, like in the coming weeks or something. I hope a lot. I would really love to just be able to just, you know, work, you know, just write a bunch of code and just, you know, lose my mind doing this stuff, because it's super fun. And it, you know, like I'm going somewhere with it, you know. There's this tool that I want to make that I can make new games with, and they'll be like weird and, you know, just entirely my own sensibility. Anyway, yeah, the stuff that I want to do here, yeah, there's this bug with how the world renders. This is actually cut off, like it cuts off midway through, and I think, and then it has like, it kind of stops partway through a row here. And I think I know exactly why that's happening. It's because of how I'm my algorithm for generating this big grid of vertices with their own UVs and stuff like that. There's a bug in that, and I need to fix that. I want to fix the artifacts with the water scroll, you know, like that's kind of not acceptable enough to, I don't feel comfortable shipping that, and I'll probably learn some important mystery of OpenGL. Yeah, I want to make this because, like, you know, I want Playsky to just feel like an application, albeit a weird one. I want to support window resizing and maximizing and full screen versus windowed mode, because, you know, I'm sure that there will be some like monkeying around and like learning how to, you know, deal with SDL, you know, get a handle to the window and all that. I want to make sure that I can distribute this easily to people who aren't like willing to run command line Python stuff, so which means on Windows packaging up a Windows executable using probably, unless there's a better option these days, Py2exe, just building this app, turning this application that is really just like a bunch of Python scripts into and GLSL shaders and stuff like that, turning that into an executable file that you can just run on Windows, because that's the humane way to ship an application to somebody. And then on Mac, likewise, bundling that stuff up into an app application bundle thing. And then on Linux, I'm a little more okay with just saying like, hey, here's a tarball of the source. You've already got Python in your system, and you're like, a couple of simple commands away from installing all of the libs that you need. Also, you're using Linux, so you're probably you probably got the big pants on. So so I'm fine just saying Linux, like go ahead and just run it from source, because Linux. And so yeah, that's shipping on those platforms. I want to scale panning and zooming. Like right now, the pan and zoom speed, I want to clamp panning to the edges of the map, and when you zoom in, like basically making panning kind of proportional to your zoom level, and like bind the thing to screen constraints so that you're not like, right now it's just drawing into a GL viewport and it kind of clamps arbitrarily. Whereas I want to make it feel more like you're going around a thing, I want to, let's see, this is a small thing that will probably be trivial once I've got other shader stuff worked out, but in original Ultima 4, when you were just looking at the world like this, these flags would wave. The flag on Lord British's castle and the flags above little towns would wave, and it was just like a little 1 pixel, like, but I want to make it do that, because it's probably educational, and it'll, it's authentic and cool and probably pretty easy. I want to have a little mouse over cursor. This is actually essential to Playski stuff, where with Playski you're going to be like, I'm going to have to turn mouse coordinates into world coordinates, quote unquote, which is to say like this 3D mesh basically that we're panning a camera over. We've got X and Y coordinates from the window where the mouse is. But then we've got like just this GL view. How do we, just do a trace into that and determine the world coordinates that we're pointing at? And so I think that'll just take the form of like, you can turn on like query mode or something, and it'll have a little box in the corner, and it'll say, square 135, 45 grassland or something. And maybe it'll have like the name of the town if you're hovering over a town. So yeah, that's not something that would be kind of a gravy feature just for Ultima 4 map view, but it's indispensable for Playski. So I figure I might as well kind of solve that, work out how to do that here. I want to make a little icon bar so that like if you mouse into the corner of the application here, it pops up just like a little row of buttons that can turn off things like zoom in, zoom out, enable, disable, CRT palette, CRT shader, change different color palettes. Like I because I think it would probably be trivial as a shader, I want to like, this is using the IBM EGA palette right now, but I also want to make it so that you can click it into the Commodore 64 palette, and possibly also the Apple II palette, or write a shader that emulates sort of what this would look like on an Apple II display, because that's rad, and that's also something that I would like to support with Playski, because just weird retro computing touchstones that create a particular aesthetic is what it's all about. And then yeah, I want like a little help screen on that menu bar where you hit a question mark, and then it's like Ultima 4 Map Viewer by JP 2014, with help from blah, and just because that's like a UI element, and it kind of puts the cherry on top, and whatever. So I have no idea how long it will take me to do this, and or whatever, but because it's a stepping stone to this larger application that I want to write, and it would kind of take care of the learning process of a lot of this, for a lot of that. This seems like something that's probably cool for me to work on, because I do want to work up to being able to make small games with my own just weird little aesthetic that's kind of ASCII art and CRT bloom and all that. And I think this is how I get here. So it's a very small start. But we're building something here, detective. We're building it from scratch. So yeah, I think that's about all I got. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Twitch stream. I just saw, like, yeah, the Twitch stream just gave out for me too. I hope everything is okay on there. Anyway, I think that's all I've got. But yeah, if anyone wants to hang out in the text chat or something, or ask me over Twitter, I'm Vector Poem on Twitter. If you didn't see the notification there. Yeah, then I don't know. Yeah, because like, and I don't know if you've got any like advice or something. You know, like if I'm doing something and it's just clearly silly or something. You know, because yeah, I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, and I just kind of want to make good decisions that will make it so that I can build something cooler and bigger with this in the future. But for now, small steps, baby steps, little. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this, and yeah, maybe I'll maybe when I'm further along with this, or I've got something else like this to talk about, I will do another stream. And I probably will also stream part 2 of Neon Struct, David Pittman's upcoming game. I've still got that save game and the dev build to play. So at some point, when I have time, I'll stream that, some more of that, because I had fun playing that, and I want to play through more of that and give Pittman feedback about his game, and it's cool. So, yeah. Yeah, text chat notes. Yeah, are you going to have this on? This is going to be open source. It absolutely is going to be open source, and it's on Bitbucket right now. I don't have a license file on it, and I need to fix that probably. Back in the day, like, I made a lot of my work GPL2, I guess, just because that was sort of the go-to open source license. Nowadays, though, I'm kind of leaning towards a more permissive license, so I'm thinking like, you know, like just MIT license or something. I don't know. So I could definitely use some guidance on that. I want this thing to be like pretty darn free. Like obviously the Ultima 4 asset itself, like it's in there and it's kind of like in a gray area legally. So, you know, I can not distribute it with that. But obviously all of my code and stuff like that, you know, I want to like, you know, and the shader is just straight up, you know, Matthias's. So I definitely want to like respect whatever he wants done with that work. Though I am kind of, you know, modifying it. But anyway, I want this to be like easy for people to look at and learn from and hack on, and eventually with Playsky add to, because I would love if people were hacking on this, and you know, we had a little community built around this tool. So yeah. All right. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and have a very good night.